All right, I think we are live. Wow, it's been a long time since we've actually been live and done this, and by a long time, really, it's only been probably about I don't know 3 months, but it got away from me. I'm not going to lie, summer got busy and things happened, and I just did not have the wherewithal to bring everybody on board and start doing our Thursday live streams again. And I'm not entirely saying the tournaments are going to go away, but for our first one back, I wanted to at least kind of do it in a more laid back format, not anything where we got to do a long drawn out tournament. So we'll see what happens. It may take a while to kind of build our audience back up because we have been away for so long, but I'm very happy that Josh is here. JC, how's it going? I missed you last week.
Yeah,
And
well, I watched that episode. It was awesome. Like I was smiling the whole time. You guys picked some incredible albums.
Yeah, there was a lot of good albums.
yeah, we had a lot of fun. I mean, the 80s is in my wheelhouse, so I can talk about the 80s all day. So that was a lot of fun. And Gary, thanks for coming back and joining us for the
Thanks
next.
for asking me.
Yeah. What are you drinking today?
Well, right now, I started earlier, but I'm on Sam Adams Jacko,
Oh,
which is a pumpkin ale.
you like all the pumpkin and those different kinds of flavored beers?
Yeah, I bought their fall harvest or their fall variety pack, whatever it is. So,
Yeah. Well, I'm juggling 3 drinks at the moment.
jeez.
So, yeah. Well, I had a water and I had a beer, and then my son just brought me a Slurpee. So I'm like, ugh.
Oh my god, is there alcohol in the Slurpee?
I'm not going to have time to talk. I'm just going to be switching drinks up,
That you're going to be peeing.
Yeah, well, no kidding. Well, I got a little urinal right here.
Nice.
So not to worry.
So I don't know if you guys saw in the message the other day. I was telling Chris though that the singer of Anthrax, Joey Belladonna, he has a Journey tribute, and it's playing the night that Chris is going to be in Massachusetts. Yeah, and I heard that he really nails it. He does a great job with those songs. I mean, the guy's still got a great voice. So yeah, I'm thinking about going to see that show next month.
Cool.
Very cool. Is he still in Anthrax or no?
Yep, he is.
Okay.
Yeah, and he sounds just as good. I saw them live, and yeah, he's always had like more of a Journey style voice. He never really had a thrash voice, which kind of set Anthrax apart. So I'd be excited to see what he does with those Journey songs.
Yeah. Hey, Trevor, how's it going? Welcome to the live stream. And Trevor, for anybody, and there's not many people watching it right now, but maybe if they watch it later, Trevor does a cool live stream on Sunday nights with what's his name? What's that guy's name? Gary?
Don?
No, he's got the title of the Rush.
All the World's a Stage.
Yeah. Scott, or what's his name? Scott from All the World's a Stage, and Trevor have a very cool live stream that make sure you check out Sunday. Because what are you doing Sunday night? You're not doing anything Sunday night but worrying about work Monday morning. So, anyway, Sven, that's right. I knew it started with an S, but
Sven and Marsha P is also on there.
Yeah. Which we got to get Marsha to join one of our live streams. But yeah, so anyway, we're talking about 5 essential albums of the 1990s. And by essential, pretty much the way I think about essential is if you're building a record collection or a music collection, regardless of what format it is, what are 5 records you need in your collection for it to be for us to take your collection seriously? Like if we came over to your house and we're going through your record collection and it's like, what do you have from the 90s? You should have these 5 albums in your collection. And if you don't, then maybe you need to run out and get it. And I always find after these episodes, I'm always like on Amazon after we're done, like ordering up at least one of the records that you guys have talked about. So, oh, Sam, how's it going? Long time. Yeah. That was a low blow, Sam. I hope you and Gary are more than just casual friends.
If I wore a toupee, my hair would look better than it does. I should wear a toupee.
I'm borderline. I'm losing my hair rapidly, guys.
Yeah, well, I beat you guys both to the. I'm like miles ahead of you guys in the hair loss department. So I've made my peace.
Yeah,
that
you got over it a while back.
Hey, Marianne, how's it going? Good to see you. Thanks for dropping by. So we each have picked 5. Well, in Gary's case, Gary, last week we had done 10, and he didn't get the memo that we whittled it down to 5. But I'm gonna offer up. That being the case, before we get started, 5 honorable mentions that did not make your 5 list. You can just go through the 5. Josh, I don't know if you have any that you picked, but
yeah,
Gary,
absolutely.
you got 5, and
I didn't pull the records, but if I were to do 5 honorable mentions, it would be Johnny Cash with his first American record. That was very close to being pulled. I mean, that brought him back into the limelight, and I think is just an incredible album. Danzig 3, How the Gods Kill. I think it's essential heavy metal album. Really, that was the album that broke Danzig, where people really started to discover him with songs like Dirty Black Summer. I would also pick Pearl Jam 10. I know that it's vogue to kind of crap on Pearl Jam, and I've done it myself at times, but I do feel that 10 really is a great album, and I really rediscovered it as of recently, and I absolutely think it's an incredible album. So I'd recommend that. And then the last 2, I would go with Soundgarden Super Unknown. I know that a lot of heavy metal fans really prefer Soundgarden's earlier work, but I think songs like Black Hole Sun, they really expanded their sound and grew as a band. So I would totally pick that. And then my last pick is kind of an obscure one, but it would be this album Bloody Kisses by Typo Negative. It was a return to doom metal, or kind of the sound of Black Sabbath, but incorporating other influences like The Cure, gothic, doom metal, Typo Negative. Those would be my 5 honorable mentions.
All right. Hey, Jason, how's it going? Thanks for dropping by. Yeah, I'm not going to say whether or not any of those happen to be in my top 5, Josh, but yeah, I can't disagree with any of those. I mean, there's no wrong answers. I mean, there may be an obscure album here or there, but I mean, Pearl Jam, you can pick any number of their albums. Soundgarden is really a non-essential album that they put out in the 90s. But anyway, Gary, what's your honorable mentions?
Okay, my honorable mentions. I've got Core by Stone Temple Pilots, their debut. I think everybody knows that one. It's a fantastic album. I've got Rid of Me by PJ Harvey. I think that's kind of a bit of a breakthrough, very raw album to me. This is alternative music. They have grunge, alternative, whatever. I consider that kind of music alternative. I went with Bad Motorfinger by Soundgarden, probably because, if nothing else, the song Outshined is one of my favorite Soundgarden songs. Of course, Rusty Cage is also on there. Another album that I really loved in the 90s, Liz Phair, Exile in Guyville. This was her answer to the Rolling Stones, Exile on Main Street. Supposedly it matches it, like it answers every song. I never totally got that, but I love the lo-fi version that this thing is. And then, of course, Coverdale Page. Thank you, Josh. To me, that gave Jimmy Page another chance to play some hard rock music, and David Coverdale got to play with Jimmy Page. They just sounded great together. So those are my 5 honorable mentions.
Excellent. Yeah, good. I like that you had kind of mixed up a little. PJ Harvey, that was one that kind of, it's like, oh yeah, PJ Harvey. I forgot about her. And Coverdale Page is just an absolute classic. Great one. I'm glad you got that on vinyl. Thanks to JC. Very cool.
It's a masterpiece.
Yeah, well, you know, Jason Black Hole's son. Yeah, I remember hearing that for the first time and kind of being blown away that that was Soundgarden, just because it sounded very psychedelic, but also very melodic. And you know, Chris Cornell could write, you know, some heavy songs, but then he could also have a little bit of a lighter touch as well. And that's just a perfect. I don't know if I'd call it a pop song necessarily, but it's the closest, I think, song that he wrote with a pop kind of a sensibility to it. But yeah. Hey, Christian, how's it going? Good to see you. So anyway, I did not pull any, so I'm just going to rattle them off the top of my head. I'm going to go with Nevermind by Nirvana. I mean, you know, I know nobody wants to talk about that album because you can't say Nirvana, Nevermind's any good because everybody, you know, wants to shit on Nirvana, you know, but you know, you listened to it back in the day when that album came out, everybody had it, everybody thought it was cool, everybody listened to it. And now, you know, like The Wall and like some, you know, other albums, you know, by artists that are no longer cool, you know, like you can't say Metallica's Black Album's any good, God forbid. If you like that album, you're not a Metallica fan and you're a borderline music fan. You know, you say you like that album, but that's not one of my picks. But I'm just saying, you know what I'm talking about? Never mind. It's a great album. It just is. And it may not be their best album. It's, you know, you could argue whether or not it even belongs in the top 10 albums of the 90s, but it was just so influential and it was a game changer. And yeah, there was grunge that came before, and they weren't the first band to do grunge, but they brought it to a larger audience and converted a lot of fans who either weren't into hard rock before or they were into hard rock, but you know, they kind of it moved a lot of fans away from traditional. I'm gonna call it traditional metal, not hair metal, but you know what I'm talking about. I think there was just this whole swell of, oh my God, this is great, and we want to hear more of it. And then suddenly, you know, you had the whole grunge movement. But so I'm picking Nevermind. Unapologetically, I am picking Nevermind. So you don't like it, fine. And then I'm gonna go with Stone Temple Pilots Purple. I'm a Purple fan. I love that one. I love the first album, Core, is just a masterpiece. Their first 3 albums to me are just perfection. But I've always kind of had a soft spot for Purple. So I'm going to go with that one. This is a wild card. This is one that probably none of you have heard of before. But it's a band called World Party. And they had an album in 1990. It was called Goodbye Jumbo. And World Party is one of those bands. It's like an artist, you know, he's like the main. There's like, so he surrounds himself with musicians. It's really, you know, to call it a band is sort of like calling Nine Inch Nails a band. I mean, Nine Inch Nails is pretty much, you know, Trent Reznor, but, you know, World Party, it's just great. You know, it was like America, they're British, but they have, it's kind of like a UK Americana style to it. Very much influenced by some of the 60s, like the Kinks and the Beatles and, you know, definitely some 60s influence. In fact, the, album packaging is very much in the style of like the White Album poster, if you have the CD, but it's just great. It's such a great, it's all over the map stylistically. And I heard it first in college. One of my roommates had it and I bought it. I'm getting it on vinyl, as a matter of fact, because I just never realized they pressed it on vinyl, but it's a great album of the very early 90s. But it's a very cool record. I'm gonna pull another one out, and I'm gonna go with Sting, 10 Summoner's Tales, which I think is just one of Sting's. You know, Sting's first 4 records to me are just all flawless, and he'd really kind of gotten very. I think his father died when he made before he made the Soul Cages album. So the Soul Cages is kind of a very subdued, very moody kind of an album, very atmospheric, compared to his first two albums. And so 10 Summoner's Tale was him kind of like sounding like the Police. Everybody had been waiting for him to make an album that sounded like the Police. And I think 10 Summoner's Tale was as close to that classic Police sound as we had gotten, because he got very kind of jazzy and pretentious, those early albums. I like him, don't get me wrong, but I think 10 Summoner's Tale was Sting kind of, writing back in that style of the classic Police. And then the fifth one, I'm going to go with Alice in Chains' Dirt. I know it's not the first album that they released, but that was the first album that I ever heard. And so many of those songs were on alternative radio, and the whole album from start to finish is great. Facelift is also obviously a masterpiece, but for me, Dirt, I just have a particular connection to that because it was my first introduction to Alice in Chains. So those are going to be my 5.
Good picks.
And that was completely off the cuff, but anyway, now we're going to get into the heart of our list, our 5 essential albums, and we'll just go, we'll go each one by one till we get through 5. So, anybody who's on watching, in real time watching this live stream, if you want to, chime in, what are some of your favorite albums or essential albums from the 90s?
Or tell us your opinion on our picks.
Yeah, but be nice. Obviously, but all right, Josh.
Rip me.
Yeah, come on.
All right.
All friends here.
So my number 5 pick, I picked for the significance of this album in the artist's career. So a lot of his contemporaries at this point were struggling to find a sound. So this artist is one of the biggest artists of the 80s, also the 70s. And his contemporaries, like if you want to look at Billy Joel, had by the mid 90s stopped making music. Madonna, she was making crazy disco dance tracks. U2 was doing Zooropa. Most of the artists that he probably looked at peers were stretching outside their comfort zone and trying to reinvent themselves. Instead of trying to reinvent himself, he went back to his roots and he went back to the sound of his album Nebraska. And this is The Ghost of Tom Joad. This came out in November of 1995. I remember it like it was yesterday. I stood in line at the record store to grab it on CD at that point, and it just absolutely blew me away. At this point in my life, by the mid-90s, I was an enormous Springsteen fan, and my 2 favorite albums were Nebraska and Darkness on the Edge of Town. Later on in my life, Tunnel of Love would become more significant and would be one of my favorite albums because of, love and love lost and heartbreak. But in the mid 90s, I hadn't experienced that much. But in the mid 90s, just to set the tone, it was the age of, there were more millionaires than ever before because of the boom of the internet and stock trading. And it was, the world was supposedly a great place, and the United States was a great place, which I'm not dogging on the United States. But what Bruce Springsteen did was he painted the picture of people that were struggling in the U.S. And songs like Youngstown and Straight Time, especially Straight Time. My God, I must have listened to that song Straight Time 10 times in a row the first day I got this album, and he paints such vivid pictures, just like in Nebraska. And at this point in my life, I was moved out of my parents' house. I was living paycheck to paycheck. I could relate to a lot of the songs. I put money aside to buy this album. The day one, it wasn't like I could run out and buy albums every day. And boy, was it worth it. So Springsteen, Ghost of Tom Joad, one of my favorite albums, and really reinvented the boss to a lot of people. And his career was an upward trajectory from this album on, because he had hit a low point in the beginning of the 90s. He said that he wrote happy music and people didn't like it. But I don't know if you guys have I know Gary loves this album, but I don't know about you, Jeff, your thoughts on it.
All right, thank you.
Yeah, That's one that I've not heard. I mean, I'm familiar with Bruce Springsteen from the 70s and 80s, but to be honest, I've maybe heard a song or two off of that. But I've heard people compare it to Nebraska. It's got kind of the same strip back kind of a style. But yeah, like if you ever feeling like, things are going good. I'm feeling kind of, relaxed about the world. Just listen to John Mellencamp and Bruce Springsteen, and they'll disabuse you of any notion you have that the world is a great place to live in. But
Gary, what are your thoughts on that album?
Well, let's just say it might show up again. That's my thoughts.
Well, it's probably an album I need to pick up. I mean, I do like Bruce Springsteen. I do like Nebraska. I just haven't felt like feeling depressed anytime, lately. But
listen to you. Don't you listen to like The Cure? I mean, don't they like sing songs about wanting to die while masturbating to a French film and shit like that?
Yeah, but nothing about, it's nothing rooted in reality, it's just whatever their own, hangups are. But with Bruce Springsteen, it's like, yeah, we are getting screwed by the government. They are taking away our jobs. I'm going to be unemployed in 5 years, like all of that stuff. I didn't need to hear that. I'd rather hear, Robert Smith whining about, the fact that he ran out of black clothes to wear, whatever, But what you know what I'm talking about, but or Morrissey, nobody loves me, but fine, whatever. But yeah, I'm just teasing you. I'm a Smiths fan. I'm a Cure fan too, so don't get bent out of shape. So we got some suggestions for essential albums. Kevin, Deliverance from Corrosion of Conformity. That's a grail, I think, for many people. I think Aaron picked that one up when we were in Salt Lake City a couple months back.
Yeah, great.
Everybody find that album, yeah. And then a band I'm not familiar with in any way. I mean, I'm familiar with the name, but their style of music, I could not tell you. Boo Radley's Giant Steps. You familiar with either? Are you familiar with Boo Radley's?
I'm not.
Just the name.
Yeah, I feel like that my coolness quotient just dropped by the fact I couldn't tell you a Boo Radley song. But yeah, maybe it's one band I got to check out. And then Kevin also gave Pantera a Vulgar Display of Power in the 90s. Was that the first album that didn't have a ridiculous album cover?
Pantera has some crazy ass album covers. There's no doubt. But Cowboys from Hell was pretty normal.
Yeah. And then Terrence Trent D'Arby, Symphony or Damn, that was his second album. That was like the album that pretty much torpedoed his career, I think, because we never heard anything more from him after that. And I've never heard it, so I don't know if it's a good album. Didn't he have an album like Neither Flesh Nor Fish or some shit like that? Wasn't there like so Symphony or Damn, was that 90s? What year did that come out? Yeah, okay, because his first album was the Hardline, introducing the Hardline according to Terrence Trent D'Arby, and then that Fish titled album was the second one. So maybe this is the third one. I don't know. I'm no Terrence Trent D'Arby expert, but very cool. Yeah, hey, Swedish WB, good to see you.
Swedish WB said Tom Waits, and if you stick around, Tom Waits may make someone's list. I'm just gonna say that.
Oh yeah, Gary's gonna show some Tom Waits, I'm sure. Springsteen, yeah, XTC, Apple Venus. Yeah, I'm a huge XTC fan. And this was kind of the point where they were like on the verge of breaking up. They really were kind of on their last legs in terms of, as a band, not creatively, but just, they were kind of fracturing, and Colin Moulding and Andy Perfect kind of getting ready to split up. Who wants to listen to music to get depressed? Well, sometimes if I'm feeling a little too euphoric, if I need a little reality check, I mean, it may throw on, some Sisters of Mercy or whatever. But
Jeff, I've been accused many times of listening to depressing music.
Yeah. But sometimes, you know, you relate to it. You're down in the dumps. Am I the only one who ever feels this way? You know, you're certainly, you know, I'm not going to throw on, you know.
Well, you know what it is a lot of times too is that like the girls that I'm dating don't like the heavy music. So like I can listen to bands like a Cinderella or something like that, right? Or Van Halen, but like I'm not going to listen to Slayer or Danzig, Pantera. So I tend to lean more towards the Springsteens, Tom Petty, Tom Waits, and a lot of their songs have some depressing lyrics.
Yeah, like if I'm feeling down in the dumps, I'm not throwing Hall and Oates on the turntable. You know, it's like I'm gonna want to listen to something that, you know.
Oh, Elliott Smith almost made my list. Oh my goodness, that was a hard one to leave off.
Would any of you consider Green Day's Dookie an essential 90s album?
Oh, I'm not the person to ask.
I don't consider it essential. I consider it a good album.
Yeah, it's a good album. It's just not, you know, I'd rather listen to the Ramones. I'm just going to say that.
But, you know, I mean, I think Green Day, you know, like Nirvana, like Alice in Chains, like Pearl Jam, that album came out, and for better or worse, there were like 20 bands that tried to be like Green Day with, you know, a fraction of the talent, a fraction of just the whole, you know, presentation they had. I mean, Green Day, I think, I mean, they were kind of at the, I don't know, sort of like near the tail end of the whole, you know, the grunge phenomenon. And so it was like, was this going to be the next big thing? And yeah, I think Dookie is probably the album that most people know from them. It may be their best album. I'm not a huge Green Day fan, so I couldn't tell you what's their best album. But, you know, for me, Dookie is the only one I've ever heard from start to finish. So, yeah, it could, you know, and none of these are like, these are the, you know, definitive essential album. It's just what we consider. So, you know, honestly, you know, Marianne, if you consider it an essential album, that's great. And I'm sure there are a lot of people who would also list that in their top 5 as well. So,
yeah, I mean, I saw them on that tour and they were great. Yeah, so like I don't dog anybody that likes the band.
Yeah, no, man.
Yeah, XO is a great album. Absolutely. Offspring smash over Dookie. And you know, and I'm sorry, I am so remiss. You know, I should have led with this, but I did not. But you know, the Smash Mouth family suffered a very tragic loss. We lost the lead singer of Smash Mouth. That's how remiss I am. I don't even know his name. The lead singer from Smash Mouth, we very tragically lost. Although that's as much as I'm going to, because if you can't say nothing nice, don't say anything at all. So anyway, but yeah, Offspring. I don't know. I don't know about. I just know what Offspring they played on the radio. But anybody want to weigh in on Offspring?
I think they're good.
Okay.
I mean, I prefer them over Green Day, but that, you know, that's just me. They've got a little bit of oddness to them that kind of separates them. You know, they got like this punk sound, but they kind of mix it up, and you know, they're not one of my favorite bands or anything, but I do like them.
Yeah, and their lyrics are very witty. They don't take themselves too serious, which is great.
They're kind of a bunch of smart asses, kind of, you know.
Yeah.
Traveling Wilburys, Volume 3. Yeah, that's a great one. I mean, what's not to like? You got Tom Petty, George Harrison, Jeff Lynne, Bob Dylan on the same band. How is that not a essential album? But yeah,
there's a song on there by Bob Dylan that it just cracks me up. Where congratulations, he sings "Congratulations for bringing me down." It's so great.
Bob Dylan. Yeah.
Thanks for depressing me.
All right.
St. Andrew's Hall. Yeah, God, that brings back memories. All right, Gary, what's your first essential album?
Okay, I'm going, just cracked it because it's 1990. You guys know this. I think you both like it. I know Josh is a big fan, but Bloodletting by Concrete Blonde. This is probably their biggest album. Probably their best album too. I mean, I guess I would go ahead and say that. This is to me almost like a greatest hits album or something. Jeanette Napolitano and the gang create a very atmospheric record here. Well, you can see it's got the roses on there, and it's got the white rose with some blood on it, and that kind of gives it a good feel. I like that album cover too. Caroline, Joey, those are a couple of their big songs, and those are a couple of the songs, or Windy off of here. I would recommend, if you're not familiar with this, you go check those out. Jeanette Napolitano is just an amazing singer, fantastic songwriter, and her voice. She's got this lower voice, but man, she can scream if she wants to. Pretty good bass player, and I just think this is a fantastic album, and I would definitely throw this as an essential 90s album.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I absolutely love that album. Thank you, because you got me into that album. And the crazy thing about that album is I one time posted on Instagram and someone instant messaged me and offered me like $250 for it. And I looked on eBay and it's selling for crazy, crazy money. So don't get rid of it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I won't.
Yep.
So Kevin got here a little late. Actually, I think you were one of the first ones. But anyway, essential and best are two different things. I think my list of 5 albums are different depending on what word you are using. Yeah, I guess, when we talk about essential, it's sort of like, what are the cornerstones of any album collection from a particular era? Like the 70s, Fleetwood Mac Rumors would be, one of the essential ones. Boston's debut, the Cars debut, Bruce Springsteen, Born to Run, like Born to Run is an essential album, but is it better than The River? Is it better than Nebraska? Is it better than Darkness on the Edge of Town? I don't know. But I think, if you're going to start building a collection, probably Born to Run would be the place to start. Same with, any artist, Fleetwood Mac or, so yeah, I think there is a difference. Essential doesn't always equate to best. Whether that's best of the 90s or best of a particular artist catalog. But I don't know if you guys have any thoughts on that.
Well, I think it's kind of like you said, it's our opinion too. I mean, like, if we wanted to say just essential, we might pick the biggest albums or whatever. But to us, our essential are, I guess I take it as albums that I would recommend to somebody, as here, these are 5 albums that I think are great from the 90s, and that maybe try to mix it up a little bit to give them a little bit of variety.
Yeah, or another way to look at it is you've got $100 in your pocket, you can buy 5 albums from a particular genre. You go into a record store, what should you buy? What should you be looking for? What would be a great place to start? But anyway, that's the way I kind of looked at it. So Nebraska is so great. Who cares if it's the saddest album ever? Yeah, but it's there. Each song is a story. That's what I love about Bruce Springsteen. He's not just kind of belly aching. I mean, he's got a story behind every song. And the way that he's able to tell such, he's able to convey so much information, so much emotion with only a few words. I mean, you're talking in many cases a 4-minute song, and yet it's like watching an hour-and-a-half movie. The amount of information and that he packs into just such a short song. That's the hallmark of a great songwriter. Yeah, Downward Spiral. That's another one. If I owned it, I might be showing it, but I don't have it in any format. I know I got to work on that, but all right. Anywho, all right, my first pick. So anyway, this was brought up before, but Soundgarden, Super Unknown, and this was released in 1994. And I remember, so much about 1994 because that was the year my first child was born. My daughter was born in June of 1994, and so I remember, Black Hole Sun coming on the radio. I remember the OJ trial. I remember Kurt Cobain's suicide and, all those kind of things that were going on at that time, but super unknown. And there were people who, yeah, it's their best album ever, and other people who were like, oh, it's not even, in my top 3. But yeah, super unknown. I mean, for me, it was them kind of transitioning into, I don't want to say a more radio friendly sound, but they were certainly, I think, expanding their audience with this album. It's heavy in places, absolutely. I mean, you've got My Way, Fell on Black Days. This really is like a greatest hits album in many respects. Spoon Man is on here. So many great tracks. The Day I Tried to Live. It's just remarkable. Bad Motorfinger is also an excellent album, but you can't go wrong with Soundgarden. But for me, I feel like if you're building a collection, you got to have some Soundgarden if you're representing the 90s. And that's where I personally would start, and then maybe moving my way backwards from there.
Man, I would agree. And I think that songs like Fell on Black Days and The Day I Tried to Live, Vernon Reid, the guitarist for Living Colour, said that The Day I Tried to Live he felt is one of the greatest songs ever written. Those weren't even the biggest hits on the album. So yeah, I mean, they were firing on all cylinders at that point. It's a great album.
Yeah. Well, then I maintain that Chris Cornell is in my top 5 greatest vocalists of all time, because he can sing, and the range to his voice is just remarkable. And I mean, it's just tragic that we lost him the way that we did, because I feel like he still had so much more, obviously, to give. But yeah, I don't know, the depth to him and his songwriting, his singing. Soundgarden was just absolutely an essential artist of the 90s and beyond, really. But anyway. Yeah, Chris Cornell. Freaking Chris Cornell. God damn it. All right. Josh, let me see, make sure. New Radicals. Maybe even Brainwashed too. Yeah. Isn't that with You Get What You Give? Is that the name of that song? That was a hit single out there. The catchy earworm radio hit off that album. And he had the funny hat.
Yeah.
I did, yeah.
He went on to be like a big music producer, produced a lot of artists and wrote songs for a lot of artists.
Yep. Uncle Tupelo, the band that spawned Wilco and Sunvolt. Yeah, and if you're a fan of Wilco, definitely check out Uncle Tupelo. Sunvolt, you already know about Uncle Tupelo. But yeah, talk about, a band that, as short of a life as they had as a band, they put out some tremendous music. No Depression is obviously their masterpiece. Anodyne was, I think, their last album, which is also very good if you happen to check that one out. Yeah, Cornell had a very powerful, very distinct voice. Nobody, and it's a line from the song Black Hole Sun, but, no one sings like you anymore. There really is nobody who sings like Chris Cornell anymore. But no doubt on Chris Cornell. I'm glad I got to see him in his prime. Yeah, well, and I was, he died in Detroit. They gave a performance at the Fox Theater. My brother was there. I unfortunately did not get to go to that show, but so there's always that tragic Detroit connection. But yeah, he was great. And even even that was, I don't know, how many years has it been now? Maybe like 8 years. But even then, like 8 years ago, he still sounded fantastic. So yeah, just a living legend. Tom Petty and the Heartbreakers, Into the Great Wide Open. Yeah, was that 1991? Holy crap. I always think of that as like a late 80s album, but yeah, you're right, 1991. So, all right, Josh, your next pick.
Okay, so my next pick is one of my favorite albums of all time. Had to choose it. Came out in 1996. To me, this is this band's best work, just to show how huge this band is 35 years later. They have 3 dates in stadiums, well, in large arenas like the Boston Garden and 2 in Connecticut in November. All 3 sold out within a half hour. It shows how big this band is, that they can do 3 dates all in the same area and sell out instantly. And that band is Tool, and this is their album Anima. I absolutely love this album. It is one of my favorite albums of all time. I love the song Eulogy, which is about Jesus and about how it's just a story of Jesus and how his own people turned on him. But they do it in a way which shows the crowd turning on Jesus. And it's so powerful. 46 and 2, Stinkfist. But the song Anima, where he talks about his disdain for LA and how he wishes a comet would come and put California into the ocean. And he's like, in the chorus literally goes, fuck all you insecure actresses, fuck all you junkies, fuck all you. He goes, I'm praying for rain. I'm praying for a comet to fall from the sky. I'll see you on Arizona Bay. Basically saying, when Arizona becomes beachfront property, that's when I'll see you. And this is an LA band saying that. So yeah, just a fantastic album. They went on to be much more progressive with their other albums. They're a progressive heavy metal band. But this album, to me, is just a masterpiece. I absolutely love it. Yeah. And I'm going to see them in November. It'd be like the 5th time I've seen them. So
I always thought that album title was Enema. But
yeah, me too. But I got corrected.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And they just came out with a new album like a year or 2 ago, didn't they?
Yeah, Fear Inoculum, it's a great album, but it's a lot. It's like the songs are really long and really complex. It's a song of heavy percussion. But if you like Rush, a lot of Rush fans like Tool because it's very progressive in the way that early Rush was. But at the same time, it's definitely heavier.
Yeah. Here's a question for you, JC. What's the best place to jump in if you're wanting to get into Tool?
Yeah, I would listen to that album, Anima, and I would listen to the song 46 and 2. I ranked, when I did my top 20 greatest songs of all time, that ranked as number 2 on my list. I feel like that is their best song to me. So I would listen to 46 and 2, and I'd listen to that album. And if you like it, then go from there.
Yeah. And I just have to acknowledge Trevor here. I'm a huge Air fan. Walkie Talkie is my favorite Air album. Moon Safari is great. But Air is kind of like an, I guess, OMD, Trevor, if I'm not too off base there, where you've got 2 guys and lots of analog synthesizers, kind of a modern take on synth pop. But yeah, really amazing, very European sounding, almost like Kraftwerk sounding lyrics. I mean, not lyrics, vocals. But yeah, Air is very cool. One of those bands that I don't think gets enough attention. Rush is my favorite band ever, but not a huge Tool fan. I do respect them, just not my cup. Yeah, fair enough. Tool's an acquired taste, I think, for many people. D-Generation's No Lunch. Never heard of that.
Such a great album. Yeah, it is so good. And the singer, Jesse Milan from D-Generation, he went on to make some albums where he actually did some duets with Springsteen. He is fantastic, too. 2 of the members of D-Generation actually joined Danzig, too.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, so yeah, they're a great band. I saw them. They opened for Kiss in 1995. I saw them live.
Well, there you go. All right. Speaking of Rush, Counterparts is a great album from the 90s. Yeah. Rush starts to lose me kind of the deeper we get into the 90s, honestly. Counterparts is probably the last album that, I can remember any of the songs from. You had Presto and then Roll the Bones and then Counterparts. And then kind of after that, it's like, oh, fuck, I don't know what came after that. Shit, I don't know. But yeah, Counterparts is a great album. Absolutely. Jesse Malin's solo albums are incredible. I feel like that's an artist Sam St. John would know about. I don't know if he's still here, but that strikes me as an artist he would totally be into. So anyway, American Music Club, Mercury. All right, Gary, what do you got next?
I think I'll show this one next because my next two picks, everybody's going to shit all over them. So, Josh, Josh already mentioned this, but
I mentioned it, Gary.
You mentioned it. Okay, I'm sorry. Jeff mentioned. I thought Josh did.
Jeff isn't cool enough to mention dirt.
Oh, you're more than cool enough, my friend. You know, this is another thing. It's kind of like you were talking about Super Unknown. This is like a greatest hits album. I mean, you know, it's starting off with them bones. It's just I believe them bones are me. I mean, that's just, this whole thing is just a fantastic album. And, you know, kind of like you guys were also saying, yeah, it might be cooler to say Facelift or something, but I don't know. I guess this is my favorite Alice in Chains album. I love this.
Well, that album artwork too. Like, what is that?
Yeah, I know, the guy coming out of the dirt. You know, you look at, I mean, Them Bones is on here. Sick Man, of course. Rooster. Now that, you know, that's another one. The thing about Rooster, to me, that song is probably one of the cooler, or I don't know if I want to use the word cooler, but one of the better songs about like a Vietnam experience since somebody like Springsteen or Billy Joel has wrote. And it's like, I don't know if this gets the credit just because of the genre of music that's in it. But just that opening line, ain't found a way to kill me yet. You know, eyes burn with stinging sweat. I mean, that's just lyrically, what a great song. Jerry Cantrell wrote it about his dad, if I'm correct. Somebody will probably correct me. But he wrote it kind of what he envisioned his dad going through, because you know, a lot of people that were in Vietnam didn't really talk about it a whole lot. And, you know, so that's kind of how he came up with it. And then his dad finally did get to hear it. And, you know, he said his dad just bawled. But this is just a powerful record, man. I had to, you know, because when we were doing this and I scrambled around to pick some records, I played this thing again today, and I'm just, you know, just pumping my fist, singing along with it and everything. This thing, you talk about an album holding up. This is just hard rock. You know, this is just heavy metal is what this is. Grunge, whatever the hell you want to call it. All I know is that this kicks ass, and it's a powerful record. Still sounds great today. So,
yeah, and not to mention Down in a Hole, that song.
Yeah,
so
Down in a Hole.
Wood, so powerful. And here's the funny thing is I remember picking up, you know how at the end of the century they always put out like, you know, like, oh, here's the top 10 albums of the last 10 years, whatever it is. Well, around 2000, I picked up like a Rolling Stone magazine. It was like the best albums of the 90s. And believe it or not, there was like no Alice in Chains on that list. And now you read any list of the best album of the 90s, and almost every Alice in Chains album is on there. And I think that's because they're one of the only bands of the 90s that their songs, they're better today than they were the day when they came out. They're just as powerful, but I think that people listen to them, they sound just as fresh, just as new. And you're right about the Vietnam thing. My father's never talked to me about Vietnam, other than one time he alluded to seeing the devil. So like for our generation that had parents or brothers that were in that war, yeah, it was a mystery, but we knew there was a lot of questions I have had that I've never asked my father. So yeah, I can imagine Jerry writing that song.
First of all, Josh, fuck Rolling Stone magazine. Nobody here takes it seriously. And yeah, Alice in Chains. If you're assembling top 100 albums of the 1990s, they should have at least 3 albums on that list. If you're going to take that list seriously, I mean, it's just, if we're being honest. But yeah, great pick, Gary.
Thank you.
Yeah. All right. Hey, Dimebag, how's it going? Just wanted to say, give you a shout out. Hello. Yeah, Rolling Stone. What a joke. Fugazi, Repeater. Anybody want to? I think I might have
that out.
Yeah, it's a great album. And yeah, definitely that's a band that in the 90s, so many of the magazines like Spin and stuff would always credit them as one of the, the best bands or unsigned bands. And they refused to sign a major label deal. And so they never got radio airplay or MTV airplay, but they were great.
Yeah. Yeah. Rolling Stone magazine, like, we could have a whole discussion on that, but nobody takes Rolling Stone serious. Nobody really, I think Rolling Stone at this point has just kind of been pandering to whoever they want their audience to be lately. But anyway, all right, my next pick is going to be a band, and to me, their first 3 albums are just entirely classics of the 90s, solid albums. If we're assembling a 100 top albums of the 90s, they would have at least 3 or 4 on there. But I'm going to go with their third album, Vitalogy. And this was kind of like the end of the classic Pearl Jam era, before they started kind of like branching out and expanding their sound a little bit. But so many great classics on here. Corduroy is an excellent track. Better Man, obviously, is great. But yeah, Pearl Jam, I don't know. I know they were part of that grunge movement, but they always had kind of a classic rock sound to them. They were heavy, but not in like a Soundgarden or an Alice in Chains way. They're always kind of a little bit different. Even from Nirvana, they were always just a little bit different. I felt like they were kind of more like classic 70s hard rock than, trying to be like, we're doing Black Sabbath riffs, or we're, kind of like paying homage to Tony Iommi, like some of the bands did. But yeah, I don't know. This has always been, 10 is great. Obviously, Versus is great. But, Vitalogy, it kind of feels like their White Album a little bit, because it's a little bit all over. But it doesn't stray too far from the Pearl Jam sound. But it was definitely kind of the end. No Code is a bit patchy for my taste. They had the, Who You Are with the sitar, like it just got a little bit like, they're kind of losing the plot a little bit. But, Vitalogy, for my money, is just a great listen all the way through. So
I agree, Jeff. And I love Vitalogy, and Versus is great too. And I love songs like Spin the Black Circle, Tremor Christ. Those songs are so good on Vitalogy. And they had huge hits like Can't Find a Better Man, which is a true story. I think that Eddie Vedder, his best songs are when he writes things that are really personal to him. And after Vitalogy, I think we saw less of that, But songs like Corduroy, extremely personal, people trying to look like him or imitate him. I think it was a great album.
Yeah, I think once he ran out, once he got tired of talking about his parents and his upbringing and stepdad and all that shit, it was kind of like, I don't know. Like, I like Pearl Jam, don't get me wrong. I have to be careful because it's my wife's favorite band, so I can't say anything disparaging. But, for me, it'll always be, it's like their first 3 albums, and then you sort of cherry pick after that. Like, here's a good couple songs on here. Yield is a pretty solid album, but it's sort of like after that, Binaural and Riot Act and all that. It's kind of like I don't want to call it forgettable, but it's just not the at the standard, not at the quality of their first three, when Eddie had an axe to grind and, was coming up with all those great melodies and riffs. But anyway, hey, Rod, how's it going? You just kind of dropped in unassumingly. Nice to see you. Collective
Right.
Souls debut album. Yeah, absolutely.
Jeff, do you wanna- Oh, sorry, man.
No, I was just going to say, I think the first album, hence allegations and things left unsaid, if I'm not mistaken.
Jeff, do you want a score update for the football game?
Yes.
Detroit is winning 7-0.
All right. Well, good. And I want to get more excited about it, but they're in Arrowhead. It's Patrick Mahomes. Is Travis Kelce playing?
I'm not sure. I'm not watching the game, so I'd have to check. But
okay, no, that's
Google the
great.
score.
Great start. So anybody who's not, I'm from Detroit, huge Lions fan. I could be watching the game, but I'm spending it with you guys. So anyway, just
unfortunately, he's actually up past Detroit.
I'm what?
You're actually up past Detroit.
Yeah. I'm a little north of Detroit. I'm not in Detroit proper. I'm not going to sit here and act like, I live in the city. I don't, but they're close enough, Gary. Close enough. Okay.
I'm just saying from the drive.
Oh yeah, right.
Like when I visited you, it's like you think you're going to Detroit. It's like, oh no, I've got another half hour to go or more.
Yeah. No, not quite. I'm a little north of the city, but anyway, so yeah, Collective Soul's debut album. Yeah, Collective Soul, when they came out, they were kind of at the tail end, also kind of tail end of the grunge era, but their first two albums, Hints Allegations is great, and then their self-titled album is also great, and that's kind of like, I have no idea what they did after that, but so what's the best magazine for music these days? I don't know. Spin, maybe? I don't know.
Yeah, it's really tough. There's a classic rock magazine that's pretty good. Sometimes I'll buy that, but it's exactly what it says: classic rock.
Yeah.
Well, I will say when it comes to Rolling Stone, I do like if they interview somebody that I like, an artist I like, I normally like that interview. Because they interview people unlike any other magazine. They ask them all kinds of different questions. They tell you like how that person is kind of acting, or if they come to their home, they describe their home a little bit. You can always tell that whoever is interviewing them is a fairly intelligent person. They're well versed. It's not like watching or listening to Eddie Trunk talk to somebody. I mean, I like Eddie Trunk, but he's kind of a doofus,
right?
So I mean, it's an actual journalist who's doing it. I do like that. What I don't like about Rolling Stone is the way they try to be so trendy with everything, and it's just obnoxious. Their interviews I like. Everything else, no.
Yeah, their last top 500 albums ranking was insulting. I was so infuriated looking at that list, and then I'm like, okay, well, it is Rolling Stone.
Yeah,
it's sort of like Saturday Night Live. They ain't what they used to be. So, but yeah, they're chasing trends. And I have so many problems with that magazine. I'm not even going to get into it. But anyway, Clutch Elephant Riders. Yeah, Aaron, I think if he were here, that would definitely be one of the 5 albums he would have shown. Blood Sugar Sex Magic, abso-freaking-lutely. Red Hot Chili Peppers. That was, and that's an album, when everybody else was going hot and heavy, you had Red Hot Chili Peppers bringing in the funk and making it fun. And, they just always, they were like, I think mid 80s is when they started, and yet they were able to still, kind of ride out the whole, I think their music was meant for the 90s. Kind of in the 80s, people weren't ready for the Red Hot Chili Peppers, but then in the 90s, it was like, oh, okay, now we get it. Now this music is cool and brilliant. And yeah, such a great album. Good pick. Seahawks made me a football fan. Fair enough.
Fair enough.
I can't comment on any team other than the Lions, I guess. No depression. Yeah, I don't know, Rod, if you caught earlier. Somebody else also brought up No Depression, the Uncle Tupelo album. Haven't bought a magazine in years. Yeah, the only time I read it is if I'm in a doctor's office or the dentist's office, and that's the only thing available. But Eddie Trunk, I would rather listen to you guys. Well,
Eddie Trunk is a name dropper, yeah, for sure.
Yeah. Or Safety Uncut the British Music. Yeah, that's another great one. I think they give you like a CD with every album or something. I mean, there's sort of like a little extras that they give you with the magazine. Any Britpop albums making anyone's top 5? I don't know. Like Oasis, you could say What's the Story of Morning Glory would be an essential album probably. Or
I know you're not the Britpop, but I would pick all the 90s Radiohead albums. I absolutely love all of those.
That may be showing up on somebody's list. We will see. Is Mojo? Yeah, Mojo's still around. Yeah, that's another great one, Christian. All right, Gary, your next pick.
Did Josh do his?
No, I didn't do mine.
Oh, you didn't do yours yet?
No. So my pick.
I'm sorry. I went on and on about Vitology and blood. Forget all you guys. Sorry about that.
I'm going to stay on the Alice in Chains bandwagon, and I chose Facelift, hoping that you guys would choose Dirt. I love both albums the same. And I can see why some people like this more, and I can see why some people love Dirt more. You guys are right. Dirt is an absolute greatest hits. And, I think that for a lot of Alice in Chains fans, because it's where we discovered them, it has a soft spot. I will tell you that this album recently, I've appreciated it more and more, where I think Dirt was always my go-to. But songs like Love, Hate, Love, that song really just hits me hard. We Die Young, Sea of Sorrow. I love both albums equally. One time, my buddy Aaron, we said this, it might have been on one of your videos, Jeff, where Aaron, he joked and he said that he loves Dirt, but he was disappointed in Dirt because it didn't live up to his expectations after Facelift. And I said to Aaron, being disappointed about Dirt is like being disappointed because your first kid got into Harvard and the second one only got into Yale. And Aaron laughed. And I was like, they're both masterpieces. And I think Aaron realizes that too. But I'm going to go with Facelift. And that's, I'm glad you guys chose Dirt. So they're both represented.
Well, and I think, Dirt was kind of, and I'm only speaking for myself, but I'd heard Dirt. And then it was kind of like, oh, well, they had an album before this. What was that? And then got into Facelift. But, it's sort of like, you always remember your first girlfriend, not necessarily your fifth. But, that's kind of how it was. I always enjoyed Dirt, but Facelift, obviously, another incredible album as well. Britpop, Spiders by Space. Never heard of that album. Is that on 90's? Okay. Ride Nowhere. Not heard of that one either. I'm feeling very uncool right now, I guess, in my 90's knowledge. But Gary, what's your next pick?
All right. Well, speaking of uncool, I really wish our buddy Chris Prophy was here. But one of my picks for the 90's, one of my favorite records, is This Time by Dwight Yoakam. During the 90's, kind of thanks to my wife, I was listening to more country also, because we'd be in the car and, once, she was into 80's rock, but once that kind of passed by, she didn't get in any of that grunge or anything like that, which a lot of people didn't. And a lot of those people that liked that 80's rock went to some of that country pop kind of stuff. But Dwight was a little bit different. She actually doesn't like Dwight Yoakam. But I like Dwight. And this album is one that it's probably one of his more solid albums. And it's the one that really broke him big. It's, it's got songs like 1,000 Miles from Nowhere, I Ain't That Lonely Yet, Fast as You. It's also on here. It's got This Time, the title track, Home for Sale, which is a great one. But one of my favorite Dwight Yoakam songs is Two Doors Down. Dwight sings country songs like the way they should be. They're either about heartache or, being a drunkard because you're heartbroken. He's not singing songs about having a sexy tractor or, shooting guns and, putting boots up your ass and that kind of bullshit. He sings actual country songs. And to me, this is one of the best of the 90s. This Time by Dwight Yoakam. Two Doors Down is, a traditional slower country song about being so heartbroken that he's turned into this drunk. It's a fantastic song. I love it. There you go.
Yeah.
I just bought my first Dwight Yoakam album not long ago. It wasn't that one though. I'll have to get the name for you, Gary. But I liked it. Yeah, so I'll get the name. I'll put it in the chat.
Cool.
Yeah, I don't own a Dwight Yoakam album. I will never own a Dwight Yoakam album. But what I will say for it is, that was kind of the era before you had what's now kind of referred to as bullshit country. Anything that comes from 2000s onward, where it's all about line dancing and it's all about, can't even call it country anymore. It's like this bastardized hybrid of, shit rock and roll. And it's got a little bit, the only thing country about it is somebody tries to affect a twang in their voice. But otherwise, it's just like, bullshit stadium rock and roll with a country twang in the singer's voice and a sing-along chorus talking about your mama or your boots or your tractor or whatever the fuck, like I can't even take it anymore. But like he's kind of like, when you think about it, like the end of the true era of country, at least country that got played on the radio. And I know there's artists who, very few people have heard of that don't get played on mainstream radio that are authentic country. I'm not saying authentic country went away after the 90s, but Dwight Yoakam, before you had the Travis Tritts, and the Brooks and Dunn and the Big and Rich and all that, bullshit. And I'm talking like I'm some big country fan and I'm getting all indignant defending I'm not a country fan, but I'm just saying, I can tolerate country up to the 90s, and then after that, like I can't even. I just assume, listen to, whatever. I won't even disparage any other style of music, but
What about Johnny Cash? Do you consider him country, or is he just? Do you not? Have you ever listened to like his American albums, Jeff?
Oh yeah, no, I like. Don't get me wrong, I like Johnny Cash. Like Johnny Cash is about as country as you'll see me get into. But yeah, I think so. I think Johnny Cash, I think he kind of embodied that outlaw country, style. Same with like Willie Nelson. I like Willie Nelson.
Yeah,
I like the Byrds when they got. I don't know. I'm not gonna say I hate country, but I don't own a lot of it. But I'm not a huge Garth Brooks fan. But I respect, like a Dwight Yoakam. So anyway, I'm not going to talk about it. I'm ill-equipped to have a country music conversation and speak intelligently about it. So I'm just going to get onto some comments here before I sound like a buffoon.
Well, Michelle really likes country, so I'm kind of in the boat with Gary, where I'm sure that like a lot of times I'm subjected to it.
Yeah, I don't hate any style of music. There's something, there's certainly something to appreciate about every style, but there's also absolute dog shit with every style.
Dwight was good in Sling Blade. He's a good actor too.
Yeah.
Different Class by Pulp. Yeah, I feel like I've heard that album before. That's ringing a bell for me. Bro Country. Yeah. Hick.
Yeah,
I've never heard that
Trevor's
before.
right.
That is awesome. You make me laugh, Trevor. Okay. All right. So my next pick, and this is a band. It's almost like you cannot talk about this band or nobody will take you seriously. For some reason, this band fell out. Well, I don't want to say for some reason. I know why this band fell out of favor. And it was the two albums that came after this particular record. And I'm talking about U2, Achtung Baby. This was U2 reinventing themselves. They could have kept on making, Joshua Tree Part 2, Joshua Tree Part 3. They could have kept going on in that vein. But I'm telling you, jaws dropped when people heard the leadoff single from this album, The Fly, and you heard that, and you're like, this is U2? And then the album dropped, Mysterious Ways came out, and people are like, holy shit, this is U2? But they reinvented themselves successfully. It's not like some bands that fall on their face or they stray too far and they lose a lot of their fan base, which U2 did, by the way, because unfortunately, U2, they went on a bit too long. Should have broken up before 2000s, in my own personal opinion. But, if U2 had broken up after this album or even after Zooropa, I think most people would consider them one of the, greatest bands of the 1980s. But because they went on too long, and they spoiled their legacy, putting out crap albums, trying to chase trends, putting out bland albums with songs that don't resonate with anybody, that just sound the same. But, Achtung Baby, it was such like a breath of fresh air. And even the cover, like that does not look like did not look like a U2 cover at the time. And they did it so successfully. Just a great album. Talk about greatest hits album. There's so many. This album plays like a greatest hits album. And it's the last, to my way of thinking, the last great U2 album. Don't give me that bullshit about All That You Can't Leave Behind. Like, yeah, it's fine. It doesn't hold a candle to Achtung Baby. Achtung Baby is the last great U2 album. And it's an essential. It's a perfect record, but it's a record that kept U2 viable throughout the rest of the decade. But anyway, that's
Jeff, I'll completely agree. And I actually need that on vinyl. I was just thinking about that the other day. The song One, I think, is one of the best songs of the 90s. Just beautiful song. Mysterious Ways, that song, you can't not smile with that song. Who's Gonna Ride Your Wild Horses? It's like hit after hit after hit after hit on that album. It's just a fantastic album in every way.
Yeah, I agree with everything you said. Honestly, I don't know why I actually didn't think of that album. I think because I think for some reason that's I think of it as the 80s, but it wasn't. It was early 90s, and it's an album. Yeah, they had to go there. Like you said, they did Joshua Tree, toured extensively off of it, became the biggest band in the world. They put out Rattle and Hum, and it's kind of like, now what do we do? Mm-hmm. You know what I mean? They had to kind of reinvent themselves a little bit and stay true to themselves. That album is the last great U2 album. I like Zooropa. But it's not great. It doesn't hold up the way. And I didn't even know that was on vinyl, to be honest with you. But
now me and Gary need to go get it.
Yeah, I got to go shopping. But
well, I'm trying to think of a band that reinvented themselves so dramatically and successfully. That was a hit album. Everybody owned that album. It was just so popular, but it was so different. You have to, like, if you weren't around at the time, it's hard to appreciate what a sea change that was for you too, because they kind of were part of that like post punk. You had the first album Boy and then October, but they were always like so, you know, just very serious and very highbrow. And, then you had the Unforgettable Fire, which was a very mature album. And then Joshua Tree was a very mature album. And it just seemed like they were going to continue on in that vein. You had Rattle and Hum, which was an album after Joshua Tree, which was a hybrid live and studio stuff. And even that was like very much like paying homage to their American idols and things. And just nobody saw that album. Nobody saw Octung Baby coming. And then it was like, holy shit. You're like, wow.
Yeah, and I think the thing that we have to put into context is like a band like REM dramatically changed, right? And some fans got pissed. They were like, what's up with this shit? Like, you know what I mean? Like, they weren't necessarily thrilled. With U2, they changed after their biggest album, and their fans weren't pissed. I mean, they were a little pissed after Octone Baby, but it didn't seem like anybody was jumping ship when Octone Baby came out. It was dramatically different, but I really feel like their fans went along with it. I don't know, Jeff, you're the big REM fan. Do you understand what I'm saying? Like how both bands changed, but it seemed like with U2, their fans weren't as pissed off as REM fans?
Yeah, well, I remember, REM, it was kind of like, I got into them in the early 80s, and then it was like Document came out. It's like, okay, well, they didn't stray too far from their sound. I mean, they were a little more radio friendly, but they weren't going off brand. And then Green came out. It's like, okay, now you got the mandolin. It's a little more folky in spots, but they still had kind of that core. And then I remember when Out of Time came out, being like, what the fuck is this? You had Kate Pearson sharing vocals on 2 songs. You had KRS-One, on the radio song. It was like, oh God, like, are we doing this? Are we really doing this? And I remember, when Losing My Religion came out, being like, oh my God, like now, the mandolin, it was sort of like, well, we're saving the mandolin for the deep cuts on Green. But still, we had Pop Song 89 and we had Stand and we had, Orange Crush. So it was still like it's REM. And then all of a sudden the leadoff single for Out of Time was Losing My Religion. And now, like, okay, I've warmed to Losing My Religion. But at the time, I'm like, oh, come on. Is that the way we're going? What happened to the REM that could kick ass and would rock out? Yeah. So, yeah, I totally identify that. Yeah, I was like pissed off when Out of Time came out because I'm like, oh my God, like, no, I cannot get with this album. But then, I mean, eventually I came around to it. But damn, was Violators a night? Yes, it was 1990. And now that you say that, I'm like, oh, I did not put that on my list. It wouldn't even make my honorable mentions, but yeah, that would be an honor. Yeah, that should have been on my list. It was not. My mistake. But yeah, great album. All right.
Great. Just you want an update on the score?
Yes.
7-7. So,
yeah,
hey, at least it's close.
Yeah, I mean, as expected. I mean, we're talking the Kansas City Chiefs. We're talking Super Bowl champs. So, but yeah, thanks for the update. I appreciate it. But what's your next pick?
All right. So my next pick was mentioned in the chat, and this artist made 2 amazing albums, one at the start and one at the end of the 90s. The one at the start was Bone Machine. The one at the end was Mule Variations. If I had to recommend a Tom Waits album that wasn't a 70s album, this is the one that I would recommend. It's got some of his best songs that I feel like he's ever written. It's actually got one of his most covered songs, which is Picture in a Frame. But, this album, if you want to dive into Tom Waits, this is the album to check out. What's He Building in There? I would recommend that song. Big in Japan, probably one of his best songs. Chocolate Jesus, hilarious song, just a great song. I really recommend this album. Tom Waits is one of my favorite artists of all time. Him and Tom Petty go back and forth. And And, there's a couple other artists like Danzig and Springsteen in the mix. But yeah, probably my favorite Tom Waits album. Came out in 1999, Mule Variations. It's awesome. Mule Variations is about the first automobile, which was a mule. So there you go.
Yeah, Tom Waits. For me, it's just hard to get past the. Like it's like his first couple albums where he's actually trying to sing. Yeah. He actually has something left of a voice. It doesn't just sound like he's got fucking COVID and he's on a ventilator. But it's yeah, that's the hardest thing for me. Yeah, it's because even I don't know, like what's the first album? Is it Nighthawks of the Dime? What's the first one where he's got that? Like it went from
Closing Time. Closing Time was the first one.
Yeah, Closing Time.
And then part of the Saturday Night. He really sings through those albums.
His hit. I mean, this is like Tom Waits on the first album. Drunk in the mood, and then it's like. Yeah. Like what the fuck?
Well, here's my Tom Waits impression. We sail tonight for Singapore.
He sounds like Christian Bale doing Batman. It's like that's.
Yeah, Swedish WB says what's he building in there is him speaking with minimal instrumentation. You're absolutely right, and I think that's the thing about Tom Waits is that he encourages people to play their instruments out of tune and incorrectly, and just for sound. It's more about the sound and the essence and focusing on certain words, and all those things appeal to me. I'm really weird, like not weird like lock up your children weird, just weird. I like weird music.
Yeah. Bjork's got some great albums. Yeah. Homogenic. I'm not familiar with that one, but like her first one, Debut, is great. Her second album, can't think of the name of it, but yeah, she's got some great stuff. What's he building? Mainly just him speaking. Never heard of that band
it's
before.
Great. It's a song. No, that's Tom Waits. It's a song.
Oh, okay. Oh, all right.
Next time you visit, Jeff, I'll play it for you. It's awesome.
All right. Yeah. See, I should just shut the fuck up. All right. Anyway, Gary, your next pick.
All right. My next one is one of my favorite artists of the 90s. And you know how like a lot of times artists seem to have 3 really good albums in a row. This is the third one of that 3-album run. And this is The Globe Sessions by Sheryl Crow. I really love this album. And to me, first of all, look at those eyes. That look right there. Jeez, think about that. But it's not just that. I mean, it's not just her looks. She's a terrific songwriter. And I don't know. Are you familiar with this album, Josh?
When you showed it one time on the video, I streamed it the next day, and I definitely liked it, but I don't own it.
Okay, because like some of these songs on here are just totally right up your alley.
Does that have River Wide on it?
Yeah,
I love that's one of my favorite Sheryl Crow songs.
Yeah, I would recommend to you, Josh, listening to the song Difficult Kind, which is just, basically a song about somebody who was in a relationship. Now they're not, and they're telling their ex-lover, if you could just see me now, you could see that I'm not that way that I was, I've changed. And it's just, it's kind of a heartbreaking song in a way. But
those are my favorite.
Not only do these songs sound good musically, but they all have, fantastic lyrics to them. By this, when I saw her on this tour a couple times, and she started playing other instruments on stage besides just guitar. She'd play bass for a lot of the songs on here, and she's just so talented. plays piano and everything else. There are so many good songs on here that are emotional sounding songs. I totally recommend this album, The Globe Sessions.
And it's got my favorite mistake, which is about her relationship with Eric Clapton, right?
Yeah. They should do a box set of her albums on vinyl.
Yeah, I mean, I don't have anything on her.
Yeah, and she's going in the Hall of Fame this year. Now's the time, right? Strike while the iron's hot. Yeah.
Well, they are going to put out Tuesday Night Music Club.
Oh, cool.
I guess so.
Another great album.
Yeah.
All right. Well, my next pick is an album that I bought as a blind buy because I thought the cover looked really cool. And when I listened to it, like my mind was blown. Like after that, this was going to be forever a top 5 album for me. And I'm talking about Radiohead, OK Computer. And yeah, the Benz was great. And Pablo Honey, is a very good album. But this is their Dark Side of the Moon. And by Dark Side of the Moon, like an album everybody should own. I can't say enough great things about this. Paranoid Android is an amazing song. It opens with Airbag, which sound a bit familiar, but still, it was just so different. And Subterranean Homesick Alien, Exit Music for a Film. It's just a masterpiece. And I don't care what your taste is. Just this album is, I don't know, for me, I listen to it, it sounds fresh. I discover new things listening to it. And it's not even an album that has to grow on you. Like I connected with this album, and I love all Radiohead stuff. I have everything Radiohead put out, but it always comes back to, and I mean some great albums in the discography, but it always comes back to OK Computer and how brilliant it was and how ahead of its time it was, and yet it draws on, for instance, Karma Police. The opening piano on it borrows from Sexy Sadie. It was inspired by Sexy Sadie, the Beatles song off the White Album. But it's melodic and it's interesting. Paranoid Android, I consider to be like a progressive rock song, like a modern progressive rock song. But I know I've talked about this album before. It's nothing new for me, but I can't talk about best albums of the 90s without including that.
And Jeff, you didn't mention my 3 favorite songs on that album. Let Down, love that song. No Surprises and Karma Police. I love all the songs on that album, but I go to Wichita a lot for work, and I was walking through this hotel after a long flight, and there was a bar with a girl just playing acoustic guitar, and she was singing Let Down as like an acoustic ballad. And it just hit me like how great the lyrics are. And sometimes with Radiohead, we forget about the lyrics because the music is so interesting and it's so complex, like Pink Floyd. But yeah, man, great lyrics too, and just a fantastic album. And I didn't pick it because I knew you would pick it, but if you hadn't picked it, I would have ran downstairs and grabbed it because it's definitely one of my favorites.
Yeah. Neil Finn, try whistling this. Yes, it's the only Neil Finn album that I own. Neil Finn, obviously from Split Enz and then Crowded House. Try Whistling This is a great solo album. I don't own anything else by Neil Finn, but yeah, great pick. Primal Scream, Screamadelica. I saw Primal Scream live when they opened for Depeche Mode on their Songs of Faith and Devotion tour, like the second leg of that particular tour. And yeah, that album I love. What was it? Moving On Up. I think that was a single off of there, if I'm not mistaken. But yeah, they kind of like, that was like the only album that I think really took hold here. Oh, hey, look at that. Megan Witcher. Welcome, Megan. We're not voting on anything tonight, but glad to have you there. Screamadelica. Yeah. Higher Than the Sun. Higher Than the Sun off Screamadelica is a great, like, it's almost a kind of a trip hop sort of a song, or I don't know the word I kind of want to use, but it's very, very cool, that album. But that, that Primal Scream came out. There was that period of time from like the late 80s before grunge kind of took hold, where there was a lot of the trip hop. Yeah, EMF, Jesus Jones, Primal Scream, The Farm, Soup Dragon, songs like that, where it was like, or bands like that, where it was like, is this going to be the new thing? Because everybody was kind of like, okay, the 90s are here. What's going to define the 90s? And there was that like period of time where you had bands like that. And then it just kind of like all went away when grunge took hold and people forgot about, bands like that. But Primal Scream, very cool. Sheryl Crow sings on Neil Finn's second solo album. Oh, cool. I had no idea. Primal Scream also had a big shift in style from jangle indie sound to dance. All right, very cool. All right, Josh, you're up.
My number one pick is easily one of my favorite albums of all time and one of my favorite artists. When it came out, I instantly connected with it. Quick reference to this artist. Some people wonder why this artist means so much to me. When I was 10 years old, I got my first record player. I only had a handful of records. My cousin bought me Damn the Torpedoes, and I spun the shit out of that record. I still love that record. I love so many of this man's records, but Wildflowers to me is just incredible. Every single song on here. Songs like You Wreck Me. I mean, who hasn't felt that? Like looking at a girl, whether it's your wife or not your wife or whoever it is that you're staring at across the room, and you're like, oh my God, this girl's destroying me right now with her. She's so beautiful. Songs like You Don't Know How It Feels. We all know that what it's like when people think your life is easy, right? No, it's like you haven't walked in my shoes. You don't know how I feel. Only a Broken Heart. Just every single song on this. And some of the deep cuts, like Climb That Hill, Higher Place, those are some of my favorite Tom Petty songs. I have the deluxe, like 10 LP version of this, and it's one of the only deluxe sets that I actually go back and listen to the outtakes regularly. People say, don't buy the box set. You'll never listen to the outtakes. He wrote so many great songs that didn't even make this album, including Leave Virginia Alone, which Rod Stewart had a huge hit for. He wrote so many great songs at this period in his life. He was giving them away. Just an awesome album. If you don't know this album, you should go out and buy this album. If the house was on fire, this is one of them that I would grab. But I'd make sure the kids get out first. But there you go, Wildflower.
Yeah, if you don't know this album, you're probably under the age of 10. I mean, that's how universal,
awesome it is.
Universally loved that album is. But yeah, great.
That's a great pick.
Yeah,
that's definitely essential.
Outcast, even though you spell, I think it's with a K, but yeah, Outcast. I've never heard that album either. But Outcast, that was kind of another album. It was like, where'd they go? They had the album with the Love Below, whatever, that album that had Hey Ya on it, and then like they just kind of vanished. Everybody was like, Outkast is the greatest R&B hip hop album, whatever you want to call it, ever, and then they just like vanished, never to be heard from again.
This song, Sorry Miss Jackson, I love that song.
Yeah,
that is, one of the best 90s songs. All right, as Jeff is gone, let's see if there's any other comments. Oh, you're back.
Okay. Yeah, no, sorry. I got to attend to a little bit of business. Any score updates, Josh?
Let me take a look. Give me 1 second. Oh, hold on. My computer's not refreshing. It is 14-7, unfortunately. Chiefs.
Right. Yeah, not surprising. Okay.
All right, so it's Gary's pick.
Yep.
Right. How is life tonight? Nobody's kidding anybody about where it goes. I'm searching for the ghost of
Oh,
Tom
there
Jones.
you go.
Josh already did a pretty good job talking about it. This one actually took me a little bit longer to get into than Nebraska, because some of these songs are, I don't know what the right word would be. There's like almost no melody to a lot of these songs on here. They're very dry. Some of them almost spoken word songs at times, but yet, and I think side one is definitely stronger than side two. But the songs on side one, which includes Straight Time, which Josh had mentioned, and the song Youngstown. I mean, I live in Ohio. I've been to Youngstown. It's up in Northeast Ohio. And there's a lot of places in that area that were, they used to be heavily industrialized, with steel mills and whatnot that just closed down. They couldn't compete with foreign competition or whatever. And it's like, oh, well, now we have this town, this city here. What the hell do we do? And Youngstown is one of those towns where, parts of it are nice, parts of it are very desolate. And, he tells the history of it. And I swear, every time I hear that song, I get goosebumps. I mean, it just raises the hairs on my arms. And there's a few songs on here that are like that, and just so many great stories. Whether it's somebody who's gotten out of prison trying not to get back in, talking about a couple, of people from Mexico who have tried to come over. They get involved in, drug cartel type business, just all kinds of things,
Right.
that go on in this, lost American dreams, different type things like Josh alluded to. It's just a fantastic album. And like you said, Bruce Springsteen, he didn't really reinvent himself. He just kind of went back to something he knows well. And, he kind of had the disaster of, when he put the double albums out, which didn't do well, which actually have some good things on there.
Yeah, you do.
Lucky Town. I think Lucky Town's a good album, but
I agree.
He went and he stripped everything down and put this sucker out, and I think it's a fantastic album.
I totally agree. And I think that, he said that he was searching for his voice during that time period. And I agree. I do enjoy Lucky Town and Human Touch. There are some great songs, including If I Should Fall Behind, which I think is one of his best songs. But you're right about Youngstown. The hair, when you were talking about, the hair stood up. And when he starts off, here in Northeast Ohio, back in the 1803, it's like, oh my God, my heart starts pumping fast. The hair stands up. And when he's like, once I made you rich enough to forget my name. And
yes, you know what? I just felt it when you said that.
Yeah.
I mean, and I have, that's a kind of song that, I mean, it inspires different, I have a son that loves that song. And I took that song and I said, this is why, you're not going to work in a factory.
Yeah.
I know I'm working in a factory and it's, it's putting bread on the table and all that stuff, but, you can be gone like that.
Yeah.
And, I mean, there's just so much that's in there that is, I could go on and on.
And I think that for me, when that album came out, like if you had seen my apartment, it was in the worst part of town. My TV was a 13-inch TV. Friends refused to go over because he couldn't watch the game on it because it was too tiny, right? Like I had nothing. I had absolutely nothing. So when you bought an album, you listened to that freaking album, and this song resonated with me because I was searching for my place in the world, and a lot of that album has to do with that, like people searching, and like you said, not trying to go down a certain path, maybe a path they've done before. And I know that you really aren't familiar with it, Jeff, but I can't recommend it enough. I mean, it's such a great album. Yeah. So goes to Tom.
I saw him on this tour, and that was fantastic. You know, he did a bunch of stuff off of here. He did stuff off Nebraska. He took some of his other songs, stripped them down, and it's just great. Chris Brophy sent me this album, and I had it on cassette, so I want to give Chris a shout out.
We love you, Chris.
Yep.
All right. Yeah. Is there a Bruce Springsteen song where he talks about how grateful he is for the health insurance package that his employer provides?
He does have a song about anal sex, because I know you were talking about Kiss and anal sex. Not to offend any viewers, but he does have a song on his A Devils and Dust album that talks about anal sex. I'm just throwing it out there. It was quite shocking.
I can never tell if you're fucking with me.
No, dude, I am 100% serious. 100% serious that he has a song about anal sex on
It's
Devils.
not called nothing. It's not called Nothing to Lose.
It's not called Nothing to Lose. And it's not trying to convince a woman to do anal sex. It's a woman telling him how much it's going to cost him if he prefers anal sex.
Wow.
I'm 100% serious. And when I saw him in concert, the young lady I was with was like, is he singing about anal sex? Yes.
And you go, yes.
Yes.
Yeah. All right. So this is all right. I just think wow. Okay. Mind blown. Okay. Anyway, let's get out of the gutter here and look at some comments. We Arrested Development, yeah. Tennessee, Tennessee, yeah. Who hasn't heard that song a million
Mr.
times?
Wendell, that was your other hit.
Yeah, Mr. Wendell, another great one. Steel Mills closed and they pumped them opioid pain pills.
They're talking about
All right, now this next comment is why you don't wait till the day of the live stream to pick your top 5 albums, because CA Mudlarks here. Well, no, I'm sorry, not that one. This one. Swedish W. My guess for Jeff's number 1, Boyz II Men, which obviously is a joke because I'm not a Boyz II Men fan, but Jeff Buckley. How did that not make my honorable mention? I've talked that album. I've talked up Grace endlessly, ad nauseum. You guys are sick of hearing it. Same, oh my God. Here he goes on about Thomas Dolby or Jeff. How did I not include that in my I don't know. I did not. And I'm remiss. If I had to do a do-over, yes, Jeff Buckley, Grace would be my number 1. But that's not the one that I picked because I did not take enough time, did not think too long and too hard about this list. But my number 1 should be Jeff Buckley, Grace, but it's not. I swap out the Sting album for Jeff Buckley, Grace. Okay. Anyway, REM, Automatic for the People.
Wow.
Yeah. I mean, it's a contender for one of the greatest albums of the 1990s. It's REM, again, reinventing themselves, but much like U2, Octung Baby, they did it very successfully. They got a whole new audience with that particular album. And for many, I remember at the time, REM fans being a little disappointed. It's like, oh my God, more mandolin, more, acoustic type songs. Where's the jangle pop? Where's the heavy songs? I mean, Ignoreland is a little bit heavy, but that's about the heaviest song on the album, if you want to call it that. But then there's such depth. It's just a masterpiece of a record. And I rank it even higher. I mean, it's hard for me because their 80s albums are such classic, but it's just the best album that they ever recorded. If you're being objective about it, it just is. I mean, Night Swimming is great. Obviously, Man on the Moon is fantastic. Everybody Hurts, Drive. So many classics. You got John Paul Jones doing the string arrangement on Night Swimming. I mean, Find the River is great. Monty Got a Raw Deal. It's an incredible album. I know Josh didn't include it on his list because he knew I would include it, but I mean, am I too off base, Josh?
No, not at all. It's such a masterpiece of an album, and I just played it the other day, and there's not a song that you would change. It's just fantastic.
Yeah, I love that album.
Yeah, great pick. And Jeff, I loved all your picks. Gary, I think you have great picks. I got to check out that Dwight Yoakam because I'm unfamiliar with that one. But yeah, I think everybody had awesome, and in the audience had great picks.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. Yeah, albums I never either heard of or hadn't thought of in a while, but that's why we do it. That's why we get your input, because you guys think of things that just kind of, we forget about, or maybe we just haven't discovered yet. So,
when you did your deep dive on REM, when you got to that album, I had to dig it out because I hadn't listened to it for a while, and I played that thing 3 days in a row. It was just. I'm like, God, this is fantastic. Why haven't I listened to this for so long?
Right. Yeah. And it never disappoints. It's not, there's some albums that I go back and listen to. I'm like, oh, I thought this album, I expected this album to be better. It's not as great as I remember it, but that's not the case with Automatic for the People. But.
And I will say, for a Swedish WB, I absolutely thought you would choose Grace. And what I'm so happy about with Grace is, and thanks to the Foo Fighters concert where they paid tribute to Jeff Buckley because Taylor Hawkins was such a fan, the younger generation is really discovering that album. And because my son, his schoolmates, they're all, they're into that album now. And Jeff has been harping that album for the last 5 years that we've known him. So, yeah, I mean, it must make you a little bit happy, Jeff, that people are jumping on the bandwagon.
Yeah, well, and I'd never heard, that album came out in 1994. And in it wasn't until probably the late 90s, after he had long since passed away, that I discovered it. And somebody had to play it. But it was my uncle. He's like, you got to check this album out. I'm like, I kind of heard of him, but the name didn't really mean anything to me. And then he played me that album, and I'm like, this is a life-changing, album for me. But so life-changing, I didn't even remember to include it on my list. But, in all seriousness, whatever. There are just so many great 90s albums, and I just had a total brain freeze on that one. But yeah, thank you for reminding me about it. C.A. Mudlarks, How Did Jeff Buckley Die? He drowned in the Wolf River in Memphis, Tennessee. He'd gone there to record his follow-up album and disregarded the signs that said, do not swim. And he got caught in the wake of a passing tugboat or whatever. So anyway, Ron Haggerty, he's into the underground extreme metal.
Can't do it.
Yeah, I'm not big into extreme metal. I don't mind Death's 80s albums, their first three, because more like Slayer, but I'm not really into extreme metal.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and what makes it extreme? How's it different from
Generally, it's guttural vocals. So it's you think Tom Waits it's the really you have no idea what they're saying kind of vocals. And I'm not dogging it because the instrumentation is absolutely amazing. And those guys, they can play like nobody's business. And I've seen a lot of those bands live because they open up for some of the bands that I've seen. But it's just not what I gravitate to. But Ron, I can totally understand why you dig it. It's just not for me.
Yeah.
But I do like the first three Death albums.
I thought you were going to say I like porno graffiti or something like that.
Extreme.
Yeah.
Hey, that guy's Portuguese. Nuno. Got to support my Portuguese
Why does the audio sound like someone is shaking some keys in the wind? I have no idea.
I know, I'm hearing that too.
Yeah, I don't know
Yeah,
what
I
that
hear
is.
that every now. Yeah, I don't know what that is.
Yeah, death metal, black metal, doom metal. But yeah, Ron, if you're into doom metal or what you call extreme metal or death metal, Ron Haggerty is the channel to check out because he's always showing. He's got albums, artists I've never. Not that I'm a doom metal, fan or anything like that, but I love watching his channel because bands I've never heard of, and Ron's so passionate about these bands and he knows so much about it. And I'm always like, oh, there's different even subgenres of doom metal. I had no idea. But yeah, check Ron's channel out if you want to learn more about that. Well, guys, this was fun. And thanks for joining us. And maybe next week we'll do the 70s. We'll go a little bit backwards in time. Because anything after 2000, I don't know. It's kind of a little hard for me, but we'll go into the 70s.
You might see more Springsteen and Petty.
Yeah. Well, for sure. Absolutely. Yep. So thank you, everybody, for showing up tonight. And we'll see you next week. Maybe we'll even start back with the tournaments. Who knows? It's very unpredictable, but this is our first live stream after a very long summer sabbatical. Thank you, Josh. Thank you, Gary.
Thank you.